His son-in-law publicly humiliated him with one cruel sentence: "If you want dinner, lick it off the floor." But what no one in that room knew was that the humiliation had been planned from the beginning, and one hidden confession would bring down an entire business empire. Subscribe now for more unforgettable drama stories with shocking twists. Have you ever accepted an invitation from family, believing it would bring everyone closer together, only to discover you had unknowingly walked into a carefully prepared humiliation? I am Daniel Vostrick, and what happened to me during my son-in-law's grand restaurant opening changed not only my relationship with my family, but also exposed a secret that would eventually destroy everything he had spent years building. My name is Daniel Vostrick. I am 64 years old, and after retiring from a long career as a structural engineer, I settled into a quiet life near a peaceful lake where I enjoyed reading, woodworking, and keeping in touch with my daughter, Elira. Since my wife passed away 6 years earlier, I had learned to live alone without bitterness. I believed that family disagreements should always be resolved with patience rather than anger. That belief was one of the reasons I accepted my daughter's invitation without hesitation. 3 weeks before everything fell apart, Elira called me on a quiet Tuesday evening. Her voice sounded brighter than it had in months. "Dad, Kellen's newest restaurant is finally opening. It would really mean a lot if you came." I smiled while looking out my living room window. "Of course I'll be there. You don't even have to ask." She thanked me several times before ending the call. Looking back, I now realize there was something unusual in the brief silence before she hung up, but at the time I thought nothing of it. My son-in-law, Kellen Dreven, had become one of the city's most recognizable restaurant owners. His luxury dining businesses appeared regularly in magazines, and local television stations often interviewed him about entrepreneurship. To everyone else, he looked like a hard-working businessman who had earned every bit of his success. Around me, however, he was distant. He never openly insulted me, but his politeness always felt rehearsed, as though he tolerated my presence only because I was Elira's father. The morning of the grand opening arrived with clear skies and warm weather. I spent extra time preparing because I wanted to make my daughter proud. I carefully pressed my only dark blue suit, polished my shoes until they reflected the light, and tucked an old silver watch into my jacket pocket. It had belonged to my late wife, and wearing it always made me feel as though she was still encouraging me to stay strong. During the drive into downtown, I noticed banners advertising Kellen's restaurant hanging from streetlights. His smiling face appeared on large promotional posters beside elegant photographs of expensive dishes. Every advertisement praised the restaurant as the city's newest luxury destination. It was obvious that enormous amounts of money had been invested into making the evening unforgettable. When I arrived, valet attendants hurried between luxury cars while photographers stood near the entrance capturing pictures of invited guests. The building itself looked magnificent. Marble columns framed the entrance, soft golden lights illuminated the exterior, and fresh flowers decorated every corner. Inside, a live string quartet played quietly while waiters carried silver trays filled with sparkling drinks. Business executives greeted one another with confident handshakes. Television personalities laughed for nearby cameras. Food critics examined every detail of the dining room before taking their seats. I felt slightly out of place, but I reminded myself that I was there for my daughter, not for anyone else's approval. I spotted Elira near the center of the room speaking with several guests. The moment she noticed me, genuine relief crossed her face. She walked quickly toward me and wrapped me in a warm hug. "I'm so glad you came," she whispered. "You look nervous," I replied. "It's just a big night." Before I could ask anything else, someone called her name from across the room. She apologized and hurried away. A few minutes later, Kellen approached me carrying the polished smile he used for cameras. "Daniel," he said while offering a brief handshake. "Thanks for coming. I wouldn't miss my daughter's special day." He nodded without making eye contact. "There are assigned seats. Someone will show you where to sit." His attention immediately shifted toward a wealthy investor entering through the front doors. Without another word, he excused himself and walked away. The exchange lasted less than 30 seconds. I told myself he was simply busy managing such an important event. Still, I couldn't ignore the uncomfortable feeling growing inside me. Every time I looked around the dining room, I noticed Kellen greeting nearly everyone with enthusiasm while avoiding even the smallest conversation with me. As dinner began, I found myself seated near the back of the elegant dining hall at a table filled with guests I had never met before. They introduced themselves politely enough, though it quickly became obvious that they assumed I was just another investor or distant business acquaintance. I chose not to correct them. Instead, I enjoyed listening to their conversations about restaurant investments, luxury hotels, and expanding corporate brands. The first courses arrived flawlessly. Every plate was arranged with incredible precision, and the service appeared almost perfect. Guests complimented the presentation, while photographers quietly moved through the room taking pictures of smiling diners. Between courses, Kellen stepped onto a small stage positioned near the center of the restaurant. He thanked his investors. He thanked his management team. He thanked the architects who designed the building. He even thanked several suppliers by name. But he never once acknowledged his family. The waiter carrying the dessert tray walked steadily toward our table, his expression calm and professional. The silver tray held several beautifully plated chocolate soufflés decorated with gold flakes and fresh berries. Conversations continued around the room, glasses clinked together, and soft violin music filled the restaurant. Then everything happened in an instant. The waiter suddenly stumbled. His entire tray tipped forward. A wave of warm chocolate, cream, and shattered porcelain crashed directly onto my lap and splashed across my suit. The dining room fell silent. Every head turned toward me. For a brief second, nobody moved. The waiter stepped backward with a look of exaggerated panic. "I'm so sorry," he shouted. Before I could even stand, Kellen's voice echoed across the room. "Well, Daniel." He slowly walked toward me, smiling as though he had just witnessed an entertaining performance. "I guess dinner really suits you." A few uncomfortable laughs came from nearby tables. I reached for my napkin, trying to wipe chocolate from my jacket without making the situation worse. Then Kellen looked around the room, making sure everyone was watching. His smile widened. "If you still want dinner," he announced loudly, "lick it off the floor." The words hit harder than the spilled dessert. Several guests gasped. Others laughed openly, believing it was some kind of cruel joke between family members. I looked around the room and saw phones rising into the air. People were recording. Some whispered to each other. Others simply stared. No one came to help me. Not even the restaurant staff. The waiter who had spilled everything remained frozen beside the broken plates. Instead of apologizing to me again, he looked directly at Kellen as though waiting for approval. Kellen chuckled and lightly patted the waiter on the shoulder. "It's fine," he said loudly. "Accidents happen." Those words weren't meant for the waiter. They were meant for the audience. He wanted everyone to think this was harmless entertainment. I finally stood, chocolate dripping from my jacket onto the polished floor. "I think it's time for me to leave," I said quietly. Kellen shrugged. "If that's what you want." His voice carried no sympathy, only satisfaction. As I walked toward the entrance, I heard scattered laughter behind me. Not everyone was laughing. Several guests looked disturbed. An elderly couple at a nearby table exchanged disappointed glances. One woman lowered her phone instead of continuing to record. A young server quietly picked up my coat from the chair and hurried after me. "Sir," she whispered near the entrance. "Your coat." Her eyes looked genuinely apologetic. "Thank you," I replied. She hesitated before speaking again. I'm sorry about what happened." Before I could answer, the restaurant manager called her name sharply from across the room. She immediately returned to work. Outside, the cool night air felt strangely comforting. I stood beside the valet station for several moments, trying to clean my suit with paper napkins. Chocolate stains covered nearly everything. The expensive evening had become a public humiliation. As I waited for my car, I glanced back through the restaurant's large glass windows. Guests had already returned to eating. Music had resumed. It was as though I had never been there. Then something caught my attention. The same waiter who had spilled the dessert approached Kellen near the bar. They believed no one outside could see them. The waiter discreetly handed Kellen a small brown envelope. Kellen slipped it inside his suit jacket without opening it. The exchange lasted only a few seconds. The waiter nodded. Kellen gave him a satisfied smile. Neither man looked surprised by what had happened. Neither looked upset. It didn't resemble an accident. It looked like the final step of something they had planned together. My car arrived. During the drive home, I replayed every moment in my mind. The forced smile. The assigned seat in the back. The waiter constantly watching Kellen. The public insult. The envelope. None of it fit together yet. But one thing became impossible to ignore. I had not simply been embarrassed. I had been selected. The following morning, I was sitting on my porch with a cup of untouched coffee when someone knocked on my front door. Standing there was a woman I had never seen before. She held a thick envelope against her chest. "My name is Mireya Solvin," she said quietly. "I used to work for your son-in-law." The seriousness in her voice told me this visit had nothing to do with an apology. It was the beginning of something far bigger. I invited Mireya Solvin inside without asking another question. The moment she stepped into my living room, she looked over her shoulder through the window, as if making sure no one had followed her. Her nervousness was impossible to fake. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked. She shook her head. "I don't have much time." She placed the thick envelope on my dining table and slid it toward me. "You deserve to know why last night happened." I slowly opened the envelope. Inside were printed emails, spreadsheets, staff schedules, and several pages marked Internal Event Strategy. At first, none of it made sense. Then Mireya pointed to one particular page. "Read the highlighted section." My eyes stopped on a sentence that made my stomach tighten. Target: Daniel Vostrick. Planned incident designed to generate emotional audience engagement. Asterisk asterisk. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. "My name." I whispered. She nodded. It wasn't an accident. I looked up at her. The waiter. He was following instructions. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process what I was reading. Why would Kellen do something like that? Mireya folded her hands together. "Because controversy sells." She explained that Kellen's marketing team had quietly changed direction over the past year. Instead of relying only on expensive advertising, they had begun creating dramatic moments inside their restaurants. Small arguments, emotional proposals, surprise celebrity visits, anything that could be recorded by guests and spread across social media. Most of those events were staged. Actors were sometimes hired. Employees received bonuses for participating. When people believe something shocking happened naturally, Mireya said, they share it with everyone. And more people visit the restaurant. I stared at the documents again. But why involve me? She sighed. Because humiliating a stranger isn't memorable. She paused before continuing. Humiliating your own father-in-law looks authentic. The room became completely silent. I remembered the dozens of phones pointed at me. The laughter. The cameras. Every second had been valuable content. Not because I mattered. Because my humiliation looked real. I flipped through more pages. Several meetings had been summarized in writing. One line stood out immediately. Public sympathy should remain divided to maximize online discussion. Another document estimated how many views the video could receive if major news pages shared it. They had predicted everything. Except one thing. Mireya leaving. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. She looked down at her hands before answering. "I resigned 2 days ago." "What changed?" They crossed a line. She explained that she had originally been hired as an operations coordinator. Her job involved organizing events, not deceiving people. At first, she believed the staged incidents were harmless publicity. But over time the situations became increasingly cruel. Employees were encouraged to embarrass customers. Arguments were secretly arranged. Negative reviews were manipulated. The family incident involving me had been discussed during a private planning meeting. She had objected. Kellen ignored her. He said emotional pain disappears, Mireya said quietly. But viral attention lasts forever. Hearing those words filled me with something stronger than anger. Disappointment. I had welcomed Kellen into my family years earlier because I believed he loved my daughter. Now I realized he saw people as tools. Even family. Mireya reached into her purse. I have one more thing. She handed me a small flash drive. There are backup files on this. I turned it over in my hand. Will this expose him? She hesitated. It proves the planning. But it doesn't prove who approved it. So he can deny everything. She nodded. He always protects himself. I looked through the living room window toward the lake outside. For the first time since the restaurant opening, I understood the truth. The humiliation had not been impulsive. It had been organized, calculated, budgeted. I thought the worst discovery had already been made. Then my phone vibrated. It was a text message from my daughter. Dad, can we please talk? There's something I should have told you before the restaurant opened. I read Alira's message 3 times before replying. Come over whenever you're ready. She arrived that afternoon, looking exhausted. The confident smile she had worn during the restaurant opening was gone. Her eyes were red, and she held her car keys so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. The moment she stepped inside, she burst into tears. I'm sorry, Dad. I guided her to the couch and waited. She needed time more than questions. After several minutes, she finally spoke. I found something weeks before the opening. She pulled a folded document from her handbag and placed it beside Mireya's envelope on the table. It was another copy of the same event planning file. I wasn't looking for it, she explained. I was searching for our mortgage papers when I found a folder in Kellen's office. You read it. I only read a few pages. She lowered her head. I saw your name. A heavy silence filled the room. What did Kellen tell you? I asked. He said it was fake. She laughed bitterly. He claimed it was an old brainstorming document that someone made as a joke. You believed him. I wanted to. Her voice cracked. But when I kept asking questions, he became someone I barely recognized. She described how Kellen had locked his office door and calmly listed everything she stood to lose if she continued interfering. Their house, their savings, her share of the business. Almost every major asset had been placed under companies controlled by him. If you destroy my reputation, he had warned her, you'll destroy your own future too. She admitted that fear had kept her silent. Not agreement. Fear. I reached across the table and took her hand. You should never have carried this alone. She nodded through tears. I know. Just then, Mireya spoke. The documents are strong, but they're still not enough. Alira looked at her in surprise. Who is she? Mireya used to work for Kellen. Understanding immediately crossed Alira's face. You know about the staged events. I know enough. Mireya leaned forward. What we don't have is proof that Kellen personally approved the plan. Without that, he could claim that over-enthusiastic employees had acted on their own. We needed something impossible to deny. That evening, the 3 of us drove to the office of investigative journalist Nolan Varys, whose reporting had exposed several corporate scandals over the years. He carefully reviewed every document without interrupting. When he finished, he closed the folder. This is significant, he said. But if I publish this today, his lawyers will argue these are drafts, not evidence. So what do we need? I asked. A confession. The room fell quiet. Nolan continued. Not forced. Not edited. Something recorded in his own words. Mireya slowly nodded. He still trusts me. Everyone looked at her. He thinks I left because I couldn't handle the pressure. She took a deep breath. If I ask for my job back, he'll probably meet me. Nolan leaned back in his chair. If he starts talking, keep him talking. For the next several days, everything depended on a single meeting. Mireya contacted Kellen and apologized for resigning. Exactly as she predicted, he agreed to meet. She wore a small recording device hidden inside her jacket. The rest of us waited anxiously in Nolan's office while the meeting took place across town. Every minute felt longer than the last. Then Mireya returned. Without saying a word, she removed the recorder and placed it on the desk. Nolan pressed play. Kellen's voice filled the room. He laughed. Then he said the words none of us expected. People don't remember good food. They remember humiliation. My heart sank. But the recording had only just begun. The room remained silent as Kellen's recorded voice continued playing through Nolan Veris's office speakers. You have to understand how people think, Kellen said with a laugh. A perfect dinner gets forgotten by next week. Humiliation spreads across the internet before dessert is finished. No one spoke. Even Nolan, who had spent years investigating powerful people, stared at the recorder without blinking. Mireya looked down at the floor. She had been sitting only a few feet away from Kellen when he admitted everything. The recording continued. It wasn't personal, Kellen said. Daniel was simply the best choice. An older family member makes the audience emotional. They argue online, share the video, and suddenly everyone knows the restaurant's name. My chest tightened. To him, I had never been a father-in-law. I had been a marketing strategy. Then came the sentence that removed any possible doubt. I approved the entire plan myself. Nolan immediately paused the recording. That's enough, he said quietly. He just buried himself. Within hours, Nolan's legal team verified the audio and confirmed it had not been altered. They advised waiting for the perfect moment to release it publicly. That opportunity arrived 1 week later. Kellen had been selected to receive the city's Hospitality Excellence Award, an honor attended by restaurant owners, investors, reporters, and local officials. The ceremony would also be streamed online. Nolan smiled when he saw the guest list. He couldn't have chosen a bigger stage. On the evening of the ceremony, I stayed home. I had no interest in watching Kellen celebrate another success. Instead, Alira and I sat together in my living room while Nolan called us through a secure video connection. It's starting, he said. The broadcast showed Kellen walking confidently onto the stage. He thanked the audience with his usual polished smile before accepting the Crystal Award. He spoke about leadership. He spoke about integrity. He spoke about treating every customer like family. The irony was almost unbearable. As his speech ended, the large screen behind him suddenly went black. Confused murmurs spread through the ballroom. A second later, the recording began. Kellen's own voice echoed through the speakers. People don't remember good food. They remember humiliation. His smile disappeared instantly. Guests looked from the screen to the stage. Some reached for their phones. Others whispered in disbelief. Then came his confession. I approved the entire plan myself. The ballroom fell completely silent. Kellen rushed toward the event technicians, shouting for them to stop the video, but it was too late. Every major news outlet attending the ceremony captured the moment live. Investors quietly stood and walked out. Several sponsors announced before the night ended that they were suspending their partnerships pending investigation. The next morning, the story dominated local headlines. Former employees began contacting reporters with their own experiences. A chef revealed that fake customer disputes had been staged for months. Another employee admitted receiving bonuses for participating in scripted confrontations. The flood of information became impossible to contain. Government investigators launched financial audits after anonymous tips suggested that promotional expenses had been disguised as ordinary operating costs. Banks froze several company accounts while investigators reviewed business records. Reservations across Kellen's restaurant group collapsed almost overnight. Within days, locations that had once required reservations weeks in advance sat nearly empty. His carefully crafted public image had survived years of praise. It could not survive one truthful recording. Still, I sensed the story wasn't over. Late one evening, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed a number I recognized immediately. Kellen. After a long pause, I answered. His voice sounded nothing like the confident businessman from the stage. Daniel, he said quietly. We need to talk. For the first time since the night of the restaurant opening. He sounded afraid. I almost ignored Kellen's call. For several seconds, I simply stared at the phone in my hand. The man who had laughed while I stood covered in chocolate was now asking to speak with me in private. Curiosity won. We agreed to meet the following afternoon at a small public park overlooking the lake near my home. When I arrived, I barely recognized him. The expensive tailored suits were gone. Instead, he wore plain clothes and looked as though he had not slept for days. Dark circles framed his eyes, and his confident posture had completely disappeared. He stood as I approached. Thank you for coming. I nodded but remained standing. You said we needed to talk. For a moment, he struggled to find the words. Then he finally spoke. The investigations are getting worse. I said nothing. My investors left. Still nothing. My lawyers think criminal charges are coming. His voice shook slightly. I need your help. There it was. Not an apology. A request. What kind of help? I asked calmly. I need you to tell investigators that everything was exaggerated. I looked directly into his eyes. You want me to lie? It would help everyone. No, I replied. It would help you. He lowered his head. I made mistakes. Mistakes. I repeated. A mistake is spilling a drink by accident. Planning to humiliate someone in front of hundreds of people is a decision. He opened his mouth to answer, but no words came. For the first time since I had known him, he had nothing prepared to say. Finally, he whispered, I'm sorry. I studied his face carefully. Months earlier, I would have accepted those words without hesitation. Now they felt incomplete. I've been thinking about that night, I said. Do you know what hurt the most? He remained silent. It wasn't the chocolate. It wasn't even what you said. It was watching you enjoy seeing people laugh at someone who trusted you. A breeze moved across the lake between us. You told me to lick dinner off the floor, I continued. You believed dignity could be traded for publicity. He quietly wiped his eyes. I can't change what I did. No, I answered. You can't. He asked one final question. So, you won't help me? I won't lie for you. Those were the last words I ever spoke to him. Several months passed. The investigations uncovered financial records showing that company funds had been used to organize staged incidents while disguising the expenses under false accounting categories. Former business partners filed civil lawsuits, claiming they had been misled about how company money was being spent. The courts eventually found Kellen guilty of multiple financial offenses connected to fraudulent reporting. He received a prison sentence, substantial financial penalties, and permanent restrictions on managing certain businesses. His restaurant group was dissolved. Properties were sold. The luxury brand that had once dominated magazine covers disappeared completely. As for Alira, rebuilding her life was not easy. She filed for divorce after realizing trust could never be restored. Instead of depending on Kellen's business, she accepted a management position at a non-profit culinary training center that helped young people develop careers in hospitality. For the first time in years, I saw genuine peace return to her face. Our relationship also healed. We spent weekends together, shared quiet dinners without cameras or wealthy guests, and talked honestly about everything we had both tried to hide from each other. Looking back, I never celebrated Kellen's downfall. Revenge had never been my goal. I simply refused to protect a lie. The truth did the rest. If there is one lesson my experience taught me, it is this. Humiliation may create attention for a moment, but integrity builds respect that lasts far longer. People can manufacture appearances, but eventually their own choices become impossible to hide. Thank you for staying with me until the end of my story. If you enjoyed this journey and want to hear more original stories filled with unexpected twists, family drama, and satisfying conclusions, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next story. I truly appreciate your support.